my friend. It is so good to see you. I feel like it's been so long since we've gotten together, even though it's only been like 2 weeks, but it feels longer than that. So I'm really excited to see you. And I hope everybody is warming up. They keep saying that spring is on the way, but I have yet to really see it. And I think that Jeff and Jacobo and some other people can agree with me that it's been a little colder than maybe we all would like, but never fear. Spring is right around the corner. If you're new around these parts, hi, I'm so glad that you're here with us. If you haven't already noticed, the chat is kind of the place to be. It is where we are all going to be sharing tips and tricks and secrets and things that work for us, in addition to helping each other get better, which is kind of the whole point that we're all here. And thankfully, you're here taking the time to improve yourself in hopefully ways that are going to expand beyond our time here today and trickle in through other parts of your life, which is just my favorite. I love whoever did like the little happy hump day Wednesday. I don't know if you guys remember, there was I forget what commercial it was, but they had the camels, and the camels would always say like happy hump day. I think that was like a 90s ad or maybe early 2000s. So if you're not that old, you maybe don't remember that. But for all of us who are maybe on the older side, perhaps you remember it, that little advertisement from back in the day, but I always think about it. So I'm so happy that you're here. And this session is going to be a little different. So normally we talk with an expert in our area, and I promise that we will get back to that. But today I thought we could take some time to turn that expertise on ourselves. And really, it's one of these lessons that I feel that I personally need, honestly, probably like once every 6 months, maybe even once a quarter. And that is delegating. And you might be a little bit like me, where you say to yourself, oh, it's just easier if I do it. It's much easier if I just handle it myself. And we're all victims of that. So I'm really excited to jump in today's workshop, because hopefully we are going to keep that attitude at bay just for a little bit. But I wanted to say hi to Pratik and Rachel and Frida and David. Oh, we have such a great group here today. That's another thing. If you're new here, say hi, let us know who you are, where you're coming in from. You might be used to other sessions where you just kind of like sit back and eat a sandwich and hang out. You can do that too, but it's kind of more fun if you lean in and get those fingers typing and join in the party. So if you haven't already, do say hello and let us know where you're coming in from. That would be super fun. So without further ado, let's rock and roll on all things what we're going to be doing today. So I put together a little agenda because I'm type A and I love agendas, but we've already tackled the first thing, which is meet each other. We did a little virtual handshake there. So it's so great to meet you. We're going to talk about 3 ways that I think it's really important to manage up. I think a lot of the stuff we hear about is about managing down, how to manage people below you, manage interns, assistants, subordinates, whoever it is, but there's not a lot of information about managing up, which I actually think is more important than managing down. So we're definitely going to go into that. We're going to go into like no-nos and mistakes to avoid. So again, I'm really excited to hop into this topic area today, because I just think it's one of those things that is super important. And honestly, we don't really talk about it enough. So I'm excited. Mark, good to see you coming in from Charlotte, and Christine coming in from Kentucky. Thanks for taking the time to be with us here today. And if you have questions or things that have worked for you or things that you've seen, all the more reason to share. Don't keep all that goodness to yourself, because that's not very nice. And we're all trying to get here and learn from each other. So if you have something that you think, this really worked for me, you know where to share it in the chat. So let's whisk ourselves away, shall we? All right, here we go. Okay, I want to kind of get a lay of the land and just figure out, because it was something that I didn't learn until like much later in my career, quite honestly. But do you consciously right now, as it stands, actively manage people that are above you? So your boss, your boss's boss. If you are an entrepreneur like me, I always think about this in terms of like my clients. Like, am I really managing my clients? And a lot of times people think that's weird, because they're like, well, wait a minute, Kim, you're kind of the hired help. Why would you be managing somebody that's hired you, because they should be like, they should be bossing you around, which they do. Let's not forget, they boss me around quite a bit. But in reality, they might hopefully not feel it or know it, but I am also consciously managing them. And so I'm just curious if anybody else out there is really active in the managing process. Oh, Barbara, so good to see you here, coming in from St. Pete. But Jen, clients absolutely count. I like to think that I manage mine maybe too much. Maybe they get a little annoyed by it, but I do think it's one of those things that is so important, because if you're not managing them, then nobody is, and that's not where you want to be. So let's talk about the best ways that I found to really manage up. And again, if you're like me or Jen or Jeff and you're an entrepreneur working for yourself or working for clients, you can think about this, like, how am I managing my clients? So here are my 3 best ways to like manage your clients, or if you're in a corporate setting, managing up, managing your boss or your boss's boss. These are things that I have learned long and hard over the years, but work really well for me. And maybe you already know 1 or 2 of them. Maybe you have 1 or 2 to add, but maybe 1 or 2 are totally new for you. And in which case, I definitely recommend you trying these. So the first thing that I always love to tell people is you are really optimizing for fast responses. So if you are kind of like running into your boss's office to ask something really quickly, or you want to just get that one client to kind of give you a quick answer, frame your questions as yes or no. Frame your questions as yes or no. I have literally, this is a true story. I have literally when I worked at corporate, can remember having my little pen and where's my notebook, like my notebook, running down the hallway after my boss, who was like stomping to a meeting. And she would literally just call over her shoulder, yes, no. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched The Devil Wears Prada, that movie where she just walks in and she starts being like, call Mark, call whatever. And you're just like furiously taking notes. So the quickest answers that you can get, the better, because then that gives you information that you need to keep the ball rolling. So reframing your questions as yes or no, hugely important, because if not, sometimes they might not respond because they'll read the email and they'll think, oh, I have to explain to Jen how I want this session to run. Instead of just emailing really quickly, I'll deal with it when I'm back at my desk. And then you know what? They get back to their desk, something else happens. All of a sudden, 2 days pass, you've got nothing done. They haven't answered you. When in reality, it could have been a really quick answer. So instead of saying, how do you want this workshop to run? Or how would you like this outline created? Which has to make them stop, think about how they want the outline created, think about how they want the workshop created. Instead, frame that question as, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create the outline in the order of the due date. I'm going to create the workshop in the order of internal teams, external teams, and outside clients. Are you good with that? That gives people a frame of reference to say, okay, either I want the workshop set up this way, or I want the outline to go this way, or I don't. And instead of you losing those 2 days because your boss thought, oh, and I have to explain how I want this to be done, or your client has, oh, I have to explain. They just say, no, I don't want the workshop set up that way. And then you go through the same process again. So you try another solution, reframe as a yes or no question. So again, if they have the time, trust me, if they have the time, they will write out a full response of how they want things done, because we've all been there where you're like, well, now that you're asking, here's the 75 things that I want done in the exact way that I want to do them. So just know that if they are not busy, they will happily probably write you a full description. But if they are busy, this is a wonderful way to catch them really quickly. The next thing that I always tell people is it's hugely important to help set priorities. This is something that I do daily with my clients, because if not, the wheels go off the wagon. Everything goes into pandemonium. And that is, instead of getting all of that work on your plate and stressing and saying, oh, I have all this work to do, or I have to work late, or I have to work over the weekend, or I'm chained to my desk and I wanted to leave early, but now I can't because they lumped on more work to me. Stop. Stop that train of thought. I know it's hard once it starts going, because I know you're a perfectionist. You're a people pleaser. You want everybody on your team to be happy. You want your boss to be happy. You want your clients to be happy. You don't want to be the big bad wolf saying no. I don't want to be the big bad wolf saying no. Nobody wants to be the big bad wolf that says no. So the good news is you don't have to be that person. You can say no, and you can say it in a really beautiful, wonderful way, which is saying, you know what? I love that you just gave me another assignment. Even if you're not happy about it, you can just say that. I love that you gave me this new assignment. However, I already have X, Y, and Z going on. So I want to get to all of them because they're all very exciting. What do you actually want me to prioritize? And that forces the other person to do two things. One, it forces them to realize, oh man, I kind of forgot that Shelby had all those other things on her plate. Ooh, I guess I need to be more careful about how much work that I'm, throwing over to her team. So it helps that other person put a frame of reference of exactly how much you're doing. And number two, it helps them think about, okay, out of those things, what do I actually want you to do? And again, this works in your personal life as well. I actually just did this last week. I had a bit of a honey-do list going, which is a honey-do list is all the things I say, honey, I'm going to need you to do these 3, 4, 5, let's be honest, 9 things that are on the list. Everything from refill the bird feeder to take out the trash to, all these things. And my lovely husband was like, I'm not going to get to all these things, which was correct. He was not going to get to all of them. What's the most important? I said, well, the trash pickup day is tomorrow. So that is the most important, or else we are going to have a lot of smelly trash for yet another week. So perfect example of also in your personal life, how it is really important to help people prioritize. And a lot of times people don't know what your priorities are. They might know what their priorities are. My husband might have said, well, spring is coming and Kim wants to see the birds. So the priority is the bird feeder, not even thinking oh, tomorrow is trash pickup day and we're going to have stinky trash for 2 weeks. So again, as Jen said, it's all about, putting the responsibility in the right place and making sure that your priorities are out loud. It's another thing. Sometimes our priorities are just in our minds. I don't know if anybody else is like this, but a lot of times I reply to emails and texts in my mind. And then I realize 2 days later that I haven't responded to my friend, or I haven't written back to the email. In my head, I'm like, oh, I did write back to you. It was just in my brain, not in real life. So same thing with priorities and due dates and deadlines. You have to make sure you're saying them out loud or typing them, or else people don't know because they cannot read your mind. And the last thing is really stepping up and bringing ideas to the plate. The absolute worst gift that you can bring to your boss or to a client or to a party is a problem with no solution. Nobody wants that. So if you are going to bring a problem or just be helpful, bring ideas. And those can be big ideas or small ideas. One of the best thing about surrounding yourself with smart, interesting, wonderful people like you have at work, or like you have in this community, or like you might have in other communities, is that you are constantly learning about new software, new tips, new tricks, new ways of doing things, new apps, new plugins. And you can take all of that back and spread the goodness. Hey, Jeff told me about, this new app that I can use. I heard about this new thing called Notion. I think we should give it a try. If you have, please bring those ideas, bring that creative thinking, bring that podcast that you learned a lot from. Anyone who's bringing in new great things, I promise you that is one of the best ways that you can manage up to those above you. It is invaluable, because a lot of times your boss or your boss's boss or your boss's boss's boss, they might not have time, or they might not have a network like you have, or they might not be able to join amazing sessions where you're learning from other interesting people. So they don't get to learn about that new app or that new plugin or that new way of thinking. So it's immensely helpful for you to be that one to bring all of that goodness back to them, back to the team. Even if they don't use it, they're going to remember that you're bringing it forward. So I always say, even if it doesn't get implemented, even if you don't know if they listen to the book or listen to the podcast or use the software or tried that new way that you learned about at that conference, keep bringing the ideas. Don't stop as much as you can. It sounds so stinking silly and small, but I promise you, it is so rare to have people that are around you that are constantly bringing new helpful things. And my guess is if you're already innately like that, you just think, oh, well, everybody does this. Kind of like if you ever have a friend who's really good at something, maybe it's like singing or drawing or playing basketball or whatever it is at that hobby. And then they ask you to do that thing with you and you are awful and they are amazing. But then they just assume that you're also going to be amazing because we all have this thing as humans where you just kind of think, oh, everybody can do this. But no, not everybody can do it. So if you are already like that, please, 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 as much as you can, keep doing that, because I'm telling you, it's not just me and Giacomo out there saying that this is true. It really is so true and can be immensely, immensely helpful. And I love how Jeff just framed it instead of saying, just don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution, really being specific. If you bring me a problem, come with 3 solutions. I love that. Really setting those expectations and managing others in a way that is so simple and yet so effective, and goes in beautifully to my kind of no-nos, which Jeff just brought up, which is bringing a problem with no solution, which we already talked about a little bit, but it's one of those things that you just see it. And even if I see other people do it and I'm not directly affected, and I'll tell you where this happens a lot, guys, email chains, especially email chains that have like 5 or more people on them, because then nobody's really kind of owning the solution and the problem solving. Because in your head, you're like, oh, well, the email was sent to me and Brendan and Jeff and Shelby and Giacomo and Gladys. So I'm sure Gladys will just answer. But then Gladys doesn't answer because Gladys thinks Jeff's answering. And Jeff doesn't answer because Jeff thinks that Giacomo's answering. And then nobody's answering and nobody's problem solving. So literally, now that I've said this, be on the lookout the rest of this week for little areas where this happens, where lots of people are on an email chain. Instead, really dive in and address the problem, even if there's lots of people on the email chain, or it's just you with one other person, and say, exactly like Jeff said, hey, here are 2 or 3 solutions, guys. Now, everybody on the email chain might be like, we don't like these solutions. They are bad. But at least you're out there trying to solve them. And that in and itself is huge. So coming forward and really, as much as possible, bringing those solutions with you. And I'm glad I'm not alone, that Jen is with me. These email chains with a bunch of people, but then nobody actually does anything, also drive me absolutely crazy. So they probably drive you crazy as well. And Mark agrees, try as much as you can to get out of that. And like, Vishal is saying, it's a very common scenario today. I wish it wasn't, but really kind of stepping in and even just attempting to solve those problems is huge. And sadly, kind of more than most people do these days. So it's very helpful. So again, those are my best tips for managing up, for managing your boss, your boss's boss, your clients, anybody who you are considered beneath. I hate that word, but you kind of know what I'm saying. Like if a client's paying me, technically I'm at their beck and call, which I am. But as we've said, just helping everybody manage the situation better. These are my best tips for managing kind of downstream. So managing anybody who sits below you. I feel like there's always a ton of advice in this world, because when we think about managing people, I think where our head automatically goes is managing downstream. Like, oh, I'm the vice president and I'm going to learn how to manage all the managers under me. That's kind of like what I think about when people say like, oh, I teach people how to manage other people. My head goes to like managing down. So I tried to think of some ways that have really not only worked for me, but maybe are a little bit different or new than things you might have heard before. So the first thing that I always like to figure out is, how does the person that is under me, again, could be anybody or somebody not under me, you know what I'm saying, that maybe maybe I'm the client and I'm hiring a vendor for something, but figure out how they learn. Because there are some people that are verbal learners. There are some people that like things written. If you've worked in client services, you know there are some clients that love the phone. There are some clients that prefer email. I even have a few clients that love doing things over text. And don't get me started down the rabbit hole about texting with clients, because I could get on a soapbox all about that, because then there's no email chain. Like, you don't know if it's official. It's really, I mean, I do it, but I don't love it. So anyway, really kind of center yourself and figure out, how can I help people learn this information the best? Because there's going to be some people that when you go into a meeting or you go into a call or you go into a Zoom, that you can spurt out a bunch of information and they will be there going, yep, and they're good to go. They're running with it. They heard you, they wrote it down, they're going. And there's going to be other people in the meeting that hear you. Maybe they hear a couple things. They don't catch it all. They kind of had to blow their nose. They stepped out to go to the bathroom. Something lit up on their phone. They're playing with their rings. They hear you, but that's just not how their brain works. That's not how their neurons are firing in their head. For them, when you send a recap email after the meeting that says, here are all the things we discussed, here's all the to-do list afterwards, that's when they go, bing, okay, like I read with my eyeballs the notes, now I got it. So again, always two different types of people that you're dealing with. Figure out what that is and what type of learning that they really do. And I love this question that Giacomo brought out, that if it's somebody that you don't know and it's your first time working with them, you know, what are some things you can do? I think this one, honestly, is my biggest, is figure out how that person wants to communicate information. Because if you don't have that, I'm telling you, like a fortune teller, what is in your future is mass confusion, because you think they're doing one thing and they're off doing another thing, or they only heard half of what you said, and so they're only doing half of it. Or you didn't send a recap email, so there's nothing for them to reference, and therefore they don't know what you're talking about. So as much as possible, A, figuring out how that person learns, and B, figuring out how they want to communicate. Phone, email, if you have to, text. Really, really important. The next thing that I absolutely despise, one of my least favorite sayings in the world, is when I'm in a meeting or when I'm on a Zoom call or when I'm with other people in a conference room and somebody finishes some big presentation or saying something and they lean back. They always lean back. They lean back and they go, any questions? And it's crickets. No one wants to say anything, because no one wants to either admit they didn't understand something, because then you're self-conscious thinking, well, what if everybody else in the room understood it, but not me? So I'm not going to ask a question. Or number two, you are so kind of perplexed that, you know, the presentation is ended, that you haven't even had time to formulate a question. But because nobody likes awkward silences, myself included, when you say any questions and then people let like 30 seconds pass and then nothing happens, they go, okay, great, glad there's no questions, and we're moving on to the sales team. When in reality, you didn't even have time to process that, like, the the presentation was over. What about that thing on slide 3? Maybe I do have a follow-up question. Like, nobody thinks in 20 seconds unless you were really ahead of the game and you wrote down questions as you go. So it is my least favorite thing when somebody like finishes and says, any questions? Oh, and I just want to bring up that Brendan was like, really investing in understanding your clients. So important, and figuring out what they value. Yes, exactly this. Exactly what Brendan just said. So ridiculously important. So instead of saying any questions, because that is horrible and nobody likes it, and Jen's right, sometimes they don't even last 30 seconds. They wait for 2 seconds and they say, any questions? Okay, great. Now we're moving on. And you're like, but I did have a question. So instead of doing that, the next time you present anything on Zoom or on a call or in a conference room or wherever you are, here is my secret trick that I do all the time. I make up a question, because here's what I've noticed. Nobody wants to go first, and nobody wants to admit that they don't know something. So a lot of times I will have the presentation or whatever it is in my mind, and I will already think of a question that I think somebody in the room might have. So I just did this 2 days ago. We were on a client call. There was a bunch of people on the call. And I said to myself, I have a feeling that they're going to ask about timelines. Maybe nobody brings it up, but I have a feeling that someone's going to say, like, how is this going to work with the timelines and holidays and calendar days and people being out? And so I finished the presentation and I said, I'm really excited to discuss this further and dive into any questions that anybody has. Here's a question that I'm already thinking that you might have. And I could literally see in the people's faces on Zoom, someone being like, okay, great. Like, I don't have to go first. And I said, I'm thinking maybe somebody has a question about timelines with all these holidays in here. Like, maybe you're kind of thinking, how is this going to work? I've already thought about that. And here's what I would recommend. And what that did is it got out the icky feeling of going first. And it got out the icky feeling of I didn't understand something or I had a concern about something. So it kind of reminds me of like in elementary school when you used to make fun of yourself before the class bully could make fun of you, or at least maybe that's what I did. It was like, I beat you to it. I beat you to the punch. So again, instead of saying, are there any questions? Anticipate what a question could be, offer it up first. That is like my super secret top tip. I'm glad you like them, Rachel, but I do this all the time. If you know me well and you've seen me give any presentation, now that I do this, you're going to like catch it every time. You're going to be like, oh, Kim did it again. And because I do it all the freaking time. I come up with questions and I answer them before other people. And it gives them time to think of a question, right? While I'm rambling on about the question that I think they might ask. Huge. This is another thing, again, kind of like a secret tip that I haven't seen in a lot of the learning when we learn about managing people. Again, I don't really see a lot of people talking about scheduling. And I say that because I am in a household that could not be different from this. So I'm just curious because again, we're in a split household here, so there's no wrong answers. But if you are like me and you are joining us today and you are an early bird, gets the worm. You are let me sit down at my desk at 8 a.m. with something hot filled with caffeine and just let me boop, 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 type away and get to like 4 o'clock. And then your brain from 4 o'clock on slowly turns to mush. Mush, mush, mush. You get to 5 o'clock, you are mushed out. You get to 6 o'clock, somebody asks you to think. No thinking. Unless you have a glass of wine, but then the ideas get a little loose. So I always say, you can have ideas with me, but after 5 p.m., after happy hour, the ideas might get a little too sans-serre zen, if you know what I mean. So really kind of thinking about what type of person you are. Or are you the type of person, Rachel's right there with me, just like 6 a.m. Yes. Or are you that type of person where you're like, you know what, Kim? I'm not a morning person. Unlike Rita, 6 a.m. sounds like a nightmare. Early afternoon, like Barbara, you're like, that's more my speed. Early afternoon is when the train starts like chugging away. Like early afternoon, like the coffee has hit, maybe even mid afternoon, that second cup of coffee is hit. And you're kind of like, okay, I'm chugging. Now I'm going. Now the train is on the tracks. That is so important when it comes to managing other humans, is figuring out what type of human they are. And I have found this so important because, again, some people are early risers. Some people are out there like Rachel and I, 6 a.m. Or they're like Eva and I, where they're just like, the morning is great. And there are some people that, like my husband, is in the other camp, which I refer to as the late night magic makers. So that is like mid-afternoon, later in the afternoon, like Giacomo, the train starts going. And 5 p.m. you're still going, 6 p.m. you're still going, 7 p.m. you're still going. Like you really get your speed like hitting that afternoon bit. And why is this so important to learn? Why does this matter? It matters because nobody likes micromanagers, and nobody is exactly like you, unless maybe lucky enough, you are surrounded with people who are exactly like you. Like maybe it's a coincidence and you start asking around and all of a sudden you realize, wow, all of the interns or all of the junior assistants or all of the assistant managers or all of the managers or all the analysts or whoever it is, like they're all like me. They all like afternoons, or they're all like me. They all like mornings. And in which case, buy a lotto ticket, because that's very rare and you are on a lucky streak, my friend. But for the most of the part, there are different people. And so you might be sitting there at 6 a.m., click, clack, clacking at them. And they wake up to like a barrage of like, where is this? What's going on? And they're just kind of getting to their desk at 10 a.m. And you've had 4 hours of click, clack, clacking where they're kind of feeling like, whoa, 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 I'm being micromanaged. And I can tell you right now, nobody likes to be micromanaged. I don't like it. You don't like it. And nobody around you also wants it. So nobody wants micromanagers, big, big no-nos. So as much as you can, if you're feeling that urge because you've been working for 4 hours and where is that other person? Or again, the reverse, you've maybe been working all night and you're like, oh, I have to wait until, Eva wakes up in the morning to like get back to me about this. If you're feeling the urge to micromanage and kind of like force that person to conform to your ways, then here is something that I recommend that has worked well for me. Maybe it has worked well for you. I'm glad that so many people here, Christabel is like, I feel seen as a late night magic maker. It is so true. My husband would feel the same way. I'm glad that Giacomo brought this up too, because not only is this true in just terms of how people naturally are, but especially now that some of us are working remotely or have global teams or have global clients, you also might be working with people that are literally on a different time schedule than you because you're in Europe and they're in Asia, or you're in Asia and they're in America, or you're in Australia and they're in South America, or whatever it is. You're also dealing with time zone changes. So also this can be super helpful for that as well, which is set up a system that works for both people. So again, if you're like me, an entrepreneur, something that works well for me and my client. If you are working in a corporate setting, maybe it's something that works well for you and whoever you are managing under you, but come up with a system. Maybe that's a daily recap, when you kind of log off for the night or for the morning or whatever it is. I kind of compare it to if you've ever played any sort of like sport when you were a kid, but like you're dribbling the basketball and it's time to toss the ball to your teammate. And your teammate is also going to go down the court dribbling the ball. And each day you kind of say like, hey, here's how the day went, passing it off to you. Okay, then that person picks up, they do their thing. Okay, here's how the day went, passing it back to you. So maybe that's a daily recap. Maybe daily is too much. You're like, I don't want to get that many emails. I don't want to, it's too much. Maybe it's the end of the week. Maybe it's a weekly recap. Maybe it's not something that's every day. Maybe it's every week. Or maybe it's not a recap at all. Maybe you're like, you know what? Recaps don't really work for me. Maybe it's a prioritized list of all the things you have to do that both of you have access to. So for instance, this is one of my favorite ways to work. I love a platform called Notion. You'll probably hear me talk about it a lot. I 1000% recommend it. I'm not sponsored by them in any way, but I really enjoy this tool, which is Notion allows multiple people to go in, to create to-do lists, to check things off. And it's so helpful to really aid people that are on different time zones, that are working at different times, that are early risers or midnight magic makers, to feel like, okay, we're all working off the same to-do list, or we're all working off the same prioritized list. So whatever that is for you, whether it is daily, whether that is weekly, whether that is just all the time in Notion, or there's a bunch of them, Asana, Monday, there's a bunch of project management softwares, but whatever that is for you, finding Slack, another one people do, but finding a way that you can have that centralized, prioritized list is so important. And I'm glad that Rachel brought this up, because a lot of email servers right now, whether you use Gmail, whether you use Outlook, maybe I use Superhuman, if there's another type of email functionality that you use that allow you to schedule messages. So if you know that you are a midnight magic maker, let's say, and you think, wow, I don't know if I want to send this email to my client at 1:30 in the morning. I'm looking at you, slightly unhinged to be sending 1:30 emails, but if it works, you might say to yourself, I'm going to schedule this email to go out at 8 a.m. And by the way, you're sleeping, or you're driving into the office, or you're taking a shower, or you're at the gym. So it looks like you're working at that time, but really you've just scheduled all these emails to be sent because you did them at midnight, or you did them at 1 in the morning. So, I'm glad that Barbara brought this up, that Microsoft Loop is a great feature as well. So true. Microsoft Loop, or as Giacomo is saying, Google has amazing features like this. And Trello, I'm glad that somebody brought that one up. I forgot about Trello, but Trello is another good one. And one more thing I'll add to this, you're going to have to try a lot of different methods. There is not one size fits all, like, oh, well, Trello works, so Trello will work for me. Not necessarily. Or, oh, Notion works for Jeff and Kim, so Notion's going to work for me. Not necessarily. Or, scheduling emails out like Jen and Rachel, it works for them, so it's going to work for me. No, it's not. Not necessarily. So a lot of these tips and tricks are going to have to try. It's like kind of trying on a shirt when you go to the mall, or when you go to a department store, or when you order things online and you get them to your house. You got to try it on and kind of see if it fits, and maybe even like wear it for a little bit. Like try Notion for a little bit, try Trello for a little bit, try Microsoft Loop for a little bit, try, Superhuman for a little bit, whatever it is, and see if you like it. And you might find after a day or a week or whatever, you're like, you know what? It still just doesn't fit. It's not comfortable. I don't like it. So you're going to have to see what works for you and what kind of feels the best. So I'm glad that Rachel, this is another really good tip that we should dive into, which is really thinking about it from the receiver standpoint. So really saying, okay, if I send this email at 1:30 in the morning, that might be fine for me. Like, I have no problem. But maybe scheduling it at 7 a.m. to catch that person, first thing in the morning before they get busy might be helpful. Because if I send it at 1:30 in the morning, but then I'm making this up, at 6:30 a.m., all of their automatic newsletters come in from the Wall Street Journal or their favorite marketing influencer or whoever it is, then again, your email is kind of buried at the bottom. So also thinking about when is the receiver most likely to open this, dig into this, settle into this. So that's another thing that really is helpful for you to think about. Or just flat out, like Jen says, asking people out loud, like, hey, when is the best time to email you? Because someone, hopefully, they have the self-awareness to go, honestly, Jen, I'm a midnight magic maker. Like, if you email me at 5 p.m., giddy up. Like, perfect time to email me. Let's go. Whereas if somebody asked me that question, I'd be like, oh, 5 p.m. email, not answering. You will get an answer from me tomorrow. Not going to happen. So again, just even out loud asking that person, when is the best time to email you? When is the best time for me to catch you? Or especially if you are involved with sales or any sort of client work, this is another really helpful tip. When are you at your desk? When are you at your desk? Because we all have had friends in sales where they might be on the road 2 or 3 days a week, but they never travel on Mondays. Or they have client calls all during the day, but client calls stop at 4 p.m. Eastern. So even just figuring out when are you actually at your desk and paying attention to emails, because they might be working busy all day, but they're not necessarily sitting down and reading your emails. So finding out that information, immensely, immensely helpful. I feel like I have so many more tips and tricks to share, especially when it comes to kind of managing, and delegating is another big one that I'm like dead set on helping people do. So if this has been helpful, if you're like, yes, these tips have been like, kind of helpful, and I'm going to take these with me and try a few out, and maybe they do well, I encourage you to head over to LinkedIn Learning. You can search my name on LinkedIn Learning in the little search bar, and there are lots and lots and lots of other little tips and tricks that I share on there that are similar to this, especially, again, one that I feel like kind of goes hand in hand with this is delegating. Because once you figure out when that person's working or figure out how to get their attention, then you can kind of tell them, here's what I need from you, or here's what I need answers on, or here's what I need you to do for me, or here's what we need to do together before the sales meeting, or whatever it is. So as much as possible, I feel like those two things really go together. So I will say, if this is helpful for you and you want to keep learning, you can always head over to linkedinlearning.com and, grab some more tips. Additionally, if you want more tips on the daily, you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm there pretty much every day. And if you are not getting these sessions directly into your calendar, what are you doing? Even if you're not type A like me, it's just helpful to have something on your calendar. At least I like to think so. So if that is the case for you, you can head over to getcoffeewithkim.com. And we have this like lovely little plugin that allows you to add the event to your calendar, just like it would any other coffee meeting that's in your Outlook or in your calendar drive or in your Google. And that way it can look like a real meeting on your calendar, which I like to think it is. So especially because in the coming weeks, we are going to be talking about AI, which I'm super excited about. We are going to be kind of digging into work and tips on how to really manage other people and manage yourself when it comes to work, especially saying no, something that we talked about at the beginning. Nobody wants to say no, but sometimes it's necessary. So we're going to be digging into that. So you can always head over to Get Coffee with Kim and it will, auto populate. So I appreciate Jeff's, strong information of like, go get those tips. I like to think so too, because I put them together and I worked really hard on them. So hopefully they're helpful for you as well. Again, I love digging into these subjects with you. I love kind of getting into the nitty-gritty, all about managing others, managing yourself. So if you have any follow-up thoughts or questions or ideas or things that popped into your mind later today or over the next couple days while you're folding laundry or walking the dog, I would love to hear them. Like, please reach out to me. I'm on, all the social networks. You can send me a message or a DM or whatever it is. I would love to hear kind of what's percolating in your mind. If you think this session would be helpful for someone else on your team that wasn't able to join, you can always send them a recap of this video. Or if they're more of a podcast person, because we talked about this, not everybody's a visual person. Sometimes people are auditory learners. That is okay too. You can always find us in podcast form on your favorite way to get podcasts, whether that's Spotify or Apple or Overcast. You can just find Get Coffee with Kim. Our episodes drop every Tuesday, and you can send it to them that way so they can learn in whatever way fits them the best. So I appreciate you so, so much, Haley and Jen and Jeff and to Clay and Giacomo and David and Christabel and so many, Ava, so many wonderful people that have joined and added in their own tips and tricks and things that have helped, because we're all better when we are learning together. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to learn with me. And I so look forward to seeing you in the coming weeks so that we can continue to learn together. Until then, have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will see you very soon.